Sir Alexander Korda, born Sándor László Kellner, the 16th of September 1893 to the 23rd of January 1956, was a Hungarian-born British film producer and director. He first worked in Hollywood during the transition to talkies from 1926 to 1930. The change led to divorce from his first wife, popular Hungarian actress María Corda, who could not make the transition because of her strong accent in English. From 1930, Korda became a leading figure in the British film industry, the founder of London Films and the owner of British Lion Films, a film distributing company. Korda was the first filmmaker to have been officially knighted. Early life. The elder brother of filmmakers Zoltán and Vincent was born as Sándor László Kellner to a Jewish family, to the parents Henrik Kellner and Ernestina Weitz, in Pusztaturpász II, Austria-Hungary, where he worked as a journalist. Career. Hungary. After the death of his father, Korda began writing film reviews to support his family. Korda changed his family name from Kellner to Korda, from the Latin phrase, Sursum Corda, which means lift up your hearts. Korda became an important film figure through his film magazines Pesti Mozi, Mozart and Világ. This led to invitations to write film screenplays. Director =. Korda's first film script was for Watch House in the Carpathians, 1914, which he also helped direct. When the First World War broke out, Korda was excused from military service in the Austrian army because of his bad eyesight. Korda made a film with Gayula Zilahi, the Duke's journalist, 1914. He also directed Tutu and Totayo, 1915, The Officer's Sword Knot, 1915, and Lion Lee, 1915. Corvin Film Korda established a film company named Korvin Film, building it into one of the largest in Hungary. His first film for them was White Nights, 1916, a big success. He followed it with A Grandmother, 1916, Tales of the Typewriter, 1916, The Man with Two Hearts, 1916, The £1 Million Note, 1916, Cyclamen, 1916, Struggling Hearts, 1916, The Laughing Saskia, 1916, Miska the Magnate, 1916, St. Peter's Umbrella, 1917, The Stork Caliph, 1917, from the novel by Mihai Babits, and Magic, 1917. Korda later regarded Harrison and Barrison, 1917, as his best film. He also made Fawn, 1918, The Man with the Golden Touch, 1918, and Mary Ann, 1918. Council's Republic During the Hungarian Soviet Republic, Korda made Avenue Caesar, 1919, White Rose, 1919, Yamata, 1919, and Neither at Home or Abroad, 1919. His final Hungarian film was Number 111, 1919. In October 1919, Korda was arrested during the White Terror that followed the overthrow of the short-lived communist government, the Hungarian Democratic Republic, because of his participation in its government. After his release, he left Hungary for Austria, and never returned to his country of birth, Vienna. After leaving Hungary, Korda accepted an invitation from Count Alexander Korda to work for his company Sasha Film in the Austrian capital Vienna. Korda worked alongside Korda, who had attracted several leading Hungarian and German directors into his employment. On the 1920 historical epic The Prince and the Pauper, the film was a major international success and inspired Korda with the idea of making international films with global box office appeal. Korda's next two films, Masters of the Sea, 1922, and A Vanished World, 1922, were both nautical set adventures based on Hungarian novels. By that stage, Korda had grown irritated with Kolorat's interference with his work and left Sasha to make an independent film, Samson and Delilah, 1922, set in the world of opera. The film was made on a lavish scale, with large crowd scenes. The lengthy shooting schedule lasted 160 working days. The film was not a success. Berlin. Unable to find further backing for his film projects, Korda left Vienna and traveled to Germany. Korda raised funding for the melodrama The Unknown Tomorrow, 1923, with backing from Germany's biggest film company, UFA. Korda returned to Vienna to make Everybody's Woman, 1924. While there, he began work on his next film, the historical tragedy in the House of Habsburg, 1924, which portrayed the mailing incident. It earned back around half of its production cost. He followed this with Dancing Mad, 1925, another melodrama. Korda had frequent problems with money, and often had to receive support from friends and business associates. Korda had cast his wife María Corda as the female lead in all his German-language films, and to a large degree, his productions depended on her star power. Korda cast her again in A Modern du Barry, 1927, which adapted the life story of Madame du Barry, based on an original screenplay by Lajos Bíró. The film may have intended to highlight María Corda's star potential to Hollywood. Korda made his final German film Madame Wants No Children, 1926, for the American studios Fox's Berlin-based subsidiary. Although made later, it was released before A Modern du Barry, Hollywood, in December 1926 after receiving a joint contract offer from the American studio First National. Korda and his wife sailed for the United States on board the steamer Olympic. Once they reached Hollywood, both struggled to adapt to the studio system. Korda had to wait some time before gaining his first directorial assignment. His first American film was a drama titled The Stolen Bride, 1927. Korda was chosen as it was a Hungarian-themed romance about a peasant's love for a countess. The film starred the American actress Billy Dove, rather than Korda's wife. After The Stolen Bride's moderate success, Korda was brought in to work on the comedy The Private Life of Helen of Troy, 1927, replacing the previous director, George Fitzmaurice. The film retells the story of Helen of Troy, parodying the plotline of historical epics of the era by transforming the classical characters into everyday people with modern problems. The film was a significant success for Korda, with his wife playing the role of Helen. After this film, however, Korda became pigeonholed as a director of female stars and exotic foreign locations. He was generally given similar assignments for the remainder of his time in Hollywood. The film was his most satisfying work in the United States and provided the template for his later success in Britain. Korda's next few films, Yellow Lily, 1928, with Dove, Night Watch, 1928, with Dove, and Love and the Devil, 1929, were disappointments as his career lost its momentum. The latter two were both silent films, but had sound effects and music added to their soundtracks as part of Hollywood's transitional phase of technology following the success of the sound film The Jazz Singer. Korda's next film, The Squall, 1929, with a young Myrna Loy, was his first talkie, and featured a Hungarian setting. Although, like many other directors, Korda had misgivings about the new technology, he quickly adapted to making sound films. Korda's marriage was strained in Hollywood. The arrival of sound films wrecked his wife's career as her heavy accent made her unemployable by American studios for most films. Love and the Devil was the last of Korda's films she appeared in, and she made only 2 more films. She became increasingly resentful of the switch in the relationship as her career was now over, while Korda, who had once relied on her for the production of his films, was relatively flourishing. Their marriage collapsed, and they divorced in 1930. Korda made 2 more sound films at First National: Her Private Life, 1929, and Lilies of the Field, 1930, both of which were remakes of earlier silent films. Gradually Korda grew more frustrated in Hollywood as he came to strongly dislike the studio system. He hoped to save up enough money to return to Europe and begin producing on a large scale there. But his lavish personal spending and the large amounts he lost in the Wall Street crash prevented this. When his producer Ned Marin moved from First National to the Fox Film Corporation, Korda followed him. Korda's new contract gave him $100,000 a year. Fox = his first film for Fox, Women Everywhere, 1930, cost slightly more than some of the programmers he had previously directed in the United States. He collaborated with several figures who would contribute to his future success in Britain. Korda was offered a series of scripts, all of which he disliked, before he finally agreed to make The Princess and the Plumber, 1930. Korda's reluctance to make the film led to his conflict with studio bosses, which brought to an end his first period in Hollywood. France. Korda went to France where he made The Men Around Lucy, 1931, for Paramount. He also made Rive Gauche, 1931. Korda had a big success with Marius, 1931, starring Rameau from the play by Marcel Pagnol. He followed it with Langton Till Havot, 1932, and The Golden Anchor, 1932. Britain. Korda relocated to London where he made Service for Ladies, 1932, for Paramount. He produced Women Who Play, 1932, for Them, London Films = Korda then decided to form his own company. In 1932 Korda founded London Films with Big Ben as the company logo. Their first film was Wedding Rehearsal, 1932. He produced Men of Tomorrow, 1932, co-directed by his brother Zoltán Korda. That Night in London, 1932, starring Robert Donat. Strange Evidence, 1933. Council's Opinion, 1933. and Cash, 1933, The Private Life of Henry VIII = Korda had a huge hit with The Private Life of Henry VIII, 1933, which he directed. It was nominated for the Academy Award for Best Picture, established Korda internationally and made a star of Charles Laughton. Korda followed it with A Girl from Maxim's, 1933, which he shot in English and French. He tried to repeat the success of Henry with A Private Life of Don Juan, 1934, starring Douglas Fairbanks, which he directed, and The Rise of Catherine the Great, 1934, which he did not. Neither did as well as Henry. Korda produced a well-respected short, The Private Life of the Gannets, 1934, and enjoyed a big success as producer with The Scarlet Pimpernel, 1934. Also popular was Sanders of the River, 1935, starring Paul Robeson and directed by his brother, and The Ghost Goes West, 1936, starring Donat. His other credits as producer include Moscow Nights, 1936, with Laurence Olivier, Men Are Not Gods, 1936, and Forget Me Not, 1936. Korda directed Rembrandt, 1936, with Laughton, which was a critical rather than commercial success. Things to Come, 1936, directed by William Cameron Menzies, has become regarded as a classic. It was written by H.G. Wells, who also wrote Korda's The Man Who Could Work Miracles. 1936. He helped finance the documentary Conquest of the Air. 1936. Denham Korda bought property in Denham, Buckinghamshire, including Hill's House, and planned to build film studios on the property. London Films Denham Film Studios was financed by the Prudential and opened in 1936. Korda was naturalised as a British subject on 28 October 1936. That same year, Korda was an important contributor to the Moyne Commission, formed to protect British film production from competition, mainly from the United States. Korda said, "If American interests obtained control of British production companies, they may make British pictures here, but the pictures made would be just as American as those made in Hollywood. We are now on the verge of forming a British school of filmmaking in this country." Quote, Korda produced Fire Over England, 1937, with Olivier and Vivien Leigh. He also attempted a version of I, Claudius with Lawton and Merle Oberon, which was abandoned. Korda made Dark Journey, 1937, with Conrad Veidt and Leigh, and had a big hit with Elephant Boy, 1937, directed by his brother from a Rudyard Kipling story. It made a star of Sabu. Korda also made some cheaper films. Farewell Again, 1938, Storm in a Teacup, 1938, with Lee and Rex Harrison. The Squeaker, 1937, Action for Slander, 1937, Return of the Scarlet Pimpernel, 1937, and Paradise for Two, 1937, Night Without Armor, 1937, with Donat and Marlene Dietrich, was an expensive epic that failed to recoup its money. The Divorce of Lady X, 1938, was a comedy with Olivier and Merle Oberon. Korda had a big success with The Drum, 1938, directed by Zoltan and starring Sabu. He produced South Riding, 1938, The Challenge, 1938, The Rebel Son, 1939, and Prison Without Bars, 1938, World War II. The advent of World War II saw Korda make more propaganda films. They included Q Planes, 1939, with Olivier and The Lion Has Wings, 1939. Korda had a massive hit with Another Imperial Adventure directed by Zoltan. The Four Feathers, 1939. By 1939, Michael Powell had been hired as a contract director by Korda on the strength of The Edge of the World. Korda set to him to work on some projects such as Burmese Silver that were subsequently cancelled. Nonetheless, Powell was brought in to save a film that was being made as a vehicle for two of Korda's star players, Conrad Veidt and Valerie Hobson. The film was The Spy in Black, where Powell first met Emeric Pressburger. Korda also produced the comedy Over the Moon, 1939, and the drama 21 Days, 1939. Korda, though, soon had financial difficulties and management of the Denham complex was merged with Pinewood in 1939, becoming part of the Rank organization. Return to Hollywood. The outbreak of World War II in Europe meant The Thief of Baghdad had to be completed in Hollywood, where Korda was based again for a few years. While in the United States, Korda produced and directed That Hamilton Woman, 1941, with Laurence Olivier and Vivien Leigh, and produced Lydia, 1941, with Oberon. He supervised Jungle Book, 1942, a live-action version of the Kipling story, directed by Zoltan Korda. He also had minor involvement in To Be or Not to Be. 1942. Return to Britain. On the 22nd of September 1942, Korda was knighted at Buckingham Palace by George VI for his contribution to the war effort. The first film director to receive the honor. MGM. Who returned to Britain in 1943 as production chief of MGM London Films, with a £35 million 10-year programme. The scheme ended after 1 year. One film and a £1 million loss to MGM. The only film to come out of it was Perfect Strangers, 1945, with Robert Denart and Deborah Kerr, which was popular. Korda directed. British Lion Films via London Films. Korda bought a controlling interest in British Lion Films. He produced A Man About the House, 1947. In 1948, Korda received an advance payment of £375,000, the largest single payment received by a British film company, for 3 movies. An Ideal Husband, 1947, which Korda directed, Anna Karenina, 1948, and Mine Own Executioner, 1948. He released 3 other films: Bonnie Prince Charlie, 1948, The Winslow Boy, 1948, and The Fallen Idol, 1948. The Winslow Boy and Fallen Idol were hits. An Ideal Husband and Anna Karenina had some acclaim but lost money. Bonnie Prince Charlie was a fiasco. Korda was also badly hurt by the trade war between the British and American film industries in the late 1940s. Korda did recover, in part due to a £3 million loan British Lion received from the National Film Finance Corporation. In 1948, Korda signed a co-production deal with David O. Selznick. This resulted in The Third Man, 1949, which was a huge success. London Films made smaller budgeted movies. The Cure for Love, 1949. The Happiest Days of Your Life, 1950. The Angel with a Trumpet, 1950. My Daughter Joy, 1950. State Secret, 1950. The Wooden Horse, 1950. 7 Days to Noon, 1951. Lady Godiva Rides Again, 1951. The Wonder Kid, 1951. And Mr. Denning Drives North, 1951. He helped finance Outcast of the Islands, 1952. Home at 7, 1952. Who Goes There, 1952. The Holly and the Ivy, 1952. The Ringer, 1952. Folly to Be Wise, 1953. Twice Upon a Time, 1953. The Captain's Paradise, 1953. And the Story of Gilbert and Sullivan, 1953. Cry, The Beloved Country, 1951. Directed by Zoltan, was acclaimed. The Sound Barrier, 1952. From David Lean was a hit. The Man Between, 1953, was an attempt to repeat the success of The Third Man. Korda helped make The Heart of the Matter, 1954. Hobson's Choice, 1954. The Bells of St. Trinian's, 1954. And The Techman Mystery, 1954. In 1954 he received £5 million from the City Investing Corporation of New York, enabling him to keep producing movies until his death. Final films. Korda's final films included The Man Who Loved Redheads, 1955. 3 Cases of Murder, 1955. A Kid for Two Farthings, 1955. The Deep Blue Sea, 1955. Summertime, 1955. And Storm Over the Nile, 1955. A remake of The Four Feathers. His last film was Laurence Olivier's adaptation of Richard III, 1955. And Smiley, 1956. A draft screenplay of what became The Red Shoes was written by Emeric Pressburger in the 1930s for Korda and intended as a vehicle for Merle Oberon, whom Korda later married. The screenplay was bought by Michael Powell and Pressburger. who made it for J. Arthur Rank. During the 1950s, Korda reportedly expressed interest in producing a James Bond film based upon Ian Fleming's novel, Live and Let Die, but no agreement was ever reached. Death. Korda died at the age of 62 in London in 1956 of a heart attack and was cremated. His ashes are at Golders Green Crematorium in London. Family. Korda was married 3 times. First to the Hungarian actress María Corda in 1919. They had 1 son, Peter Vincent Korda, and divorced in 1930. In 1939, he married the film star Merle Oberon. They divorced 6 years later. He married, lastly, on 8 June 1953, Alexandra Boykin, 1928–1966, who survived him. Korda's younger brothers, Zoltan and Vincent, were also directors. Korda's nephew Michael Korda, Vincent's son, wrote a roman à clef about Merle Oberon, published after her death. It was entitled Queenie. He also wrote a memoir about his large, extended family and filmmaker father and uncles' legacy and honors. He was knighted for contributions to the film industry. The Alexander Korda Award for Outstanding British Film of the Year is given in his honour by the British Academy of Film and Television Arts. Filmography. The following films were directed by Korda. The following additional films were produced by Alexander Korda but not directed by him. Unmade Projects. Korda announced a number of projects which were never made, including The Life of T.E. Lawrence with Leslie Howard, later to be directed by Brian Desmond Hurst. The Life of Nijinsky. 1930s. Cyrano de Bergerac with Charles Lawton. 1930s–1940s. Precious Pain with Robert Dinart. Burmese Silver with Conrad Veidt. 1930s. The Story of Pocahontas starring Merle Oberon. 1939. Adaptation of Man and Lesko for Merle Oberon. An adaptation of War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy to star Merle Oberon. 1940s. Velvet Coat. The Life of Robert Louis Stevenson with Oberon and Robert Dinart. An adaptation of Green Mantle by John Buchan. Lottie Dundas starring Vivian Leigh from the play by Enid Bagnold. An adaptation of The Wrecker by Robert Louis Stevenson. Habitation Enforced from the story by Rudyard Kipling. An adaptation of The King's General by Daphne du Maurier. Late 1940s. The Promotion of the Admiral from the novel by C.S. Forrester starring Ralph Richardson, directed by Powell and Pressburger. 1940s. A Tale of Two Cities with Gregory Peck. Tess of the D'Urbervilles with Jennifer Jones as Tess. Around the World in 80 Days. The Magic Mountain by Thomas Mann. Point Counterpoint by Aldous Huxley. Bibliography. Kulik, Carol. Alexander Korda. The Man Who Could Work Miracles. Virgin Books. 1990. ISBN 9780870003356. Korda, Michael. Another Life. A Memoir of Other People. Random House Publishing Group. 1999. ISBN 9780679456599. Korda, Michael. Charmed Lives. A Family Romance. Random House. 1979. ISBN 9780394419541. Alexander Korda on IMDb. Alexander Korda at the British Film Institute's Screen Online. Alexander Korda at Virtual History. Alexander Korda at Find a Grave.